everyone, Aisha here. So I wanted to talk to you about feeling alone or being alone on your single motherhood journey. So I remember when I was early in my single motherhood journey, I forget exactly how old my kids were, but they were toddlers at that particular point in time. And so I was playing with them one day, and then all of a sudden this wave of sadness overcame me. And then I ended up just walking up the stairs and just sitting on the top of the steps and just began to cry. I just began to literally weep because I felt so alone. But the strange thing is that physically I was not alone. My kids were with me. I was just playing with my kids, but also my family is always around. And so I'm surrounded by people who love me, like my family and my kids and even church support. But I still felt alone. Like, you know that saying where you can feel alone in a crowded room? Like, that is how I felt. And I felt alone because it wasn't that I didn't have a good support system, which I did. I felt alone because I didn't think that anyone understood what I was going through. And so one of the things is that I think that I was really struggling with the fact that life looked different than what I expected it to look like. I expected for me to have kids once I was married, and things were going to be different because I had quit my job to become a full-time entrepreneur. Was working in corporate finance, making a great amount of money. Career was growing and just doing a lot of amazing things, as well as having a business on the side, actually 2 businesses on the side, where, I was just building out my dream. And then I quit my job to become a full-time entrepreneur. And then a couple of months later, I ended up finding out I was pregnant. And not too long after that I was going to be a single mom, not just a single mom, but a single mom of twins. And so I didn't understand how that was happening. I felt like everything around me was collapsing. And then I felt so alone. I remember having friends check in on me, but I still felt alone. I felt like, I'm looking around at people, they're getting married, and, then they're having kids. But here I was having kids, not married, and coming from a 2-parent household. And, just getting great grades and everything in school, and always being that person who I didn't think that single motherhood would happen to. Matter of fact, funny story, I was just talking to my cousin not too long ago, and we were just reminiscing about different things, just our faith walk and everything, and some of the things that we've been through, together, right? And how we were like unlikely people to be teaching the gospel to other people, right? And so he said that, and I talked to him about how I struggled with these feelings of feeling alone and feeling like something was wrong with me because I was a single mom. And he was truthful. He never told me this. Like 8 years later, he tells me this. He was just like, yeah, I remember when you told me you were a single mom. He was like, Aisha, not Aisha. She was the last person I would have thought would have been a single mom. And it was just so funny to hear that reaction because that was mine too. And so I remember when I was pregnant and I was dealing with a lot of shame. One of the ladies at church told me, she just looked at me and said, you know what? You're not the first person to get pregnant without being married, and you're not going to be the last one who got pregnant and you're not married. So you're not alone. Because I felt alone because I was looking at my mom. I'm like, okay, she was married. I'm like, my grandma was married. I'm like, how I end up not married? And so like that helped me to feel better that I was not alone, because I really struggled with that, those feelings of feeling alone. And it really, as I was just thinking about this, and what I wanted to share today, I was reminded of the story of Elijah. And so we all know the prophet Elijah in terms of his story about being fed by the ravens when there was a drought. So he went in, in 1 Kings 17, verse 3, the Lord tells him to depart and go by a brook at Cherith, right? Because there was a drought. And he actually called the drought because of the idolatry of the people of Israel from turning away from God, right? And then after the brook dried up and he didn't have anything there, and while he was by the brook, the ravens were bringing him food every day. Then he ended up being cared for by a widow. So the widow gave him food. He then comes back, confronts Ahab and Jezebel. He defeats the prophets of Baal in a major stunning victory, the Lord ends up sending rain. And what ends up happening is Jezebel threatens to kill Elijah. Now over in 1 Kings 19, Jezebel threatens to kill Elijah. Elijah literally has to run for his life. In verse 3 of chapter 19 of 1 Kings, it says, then he was afraid, and he arose and ran for his life and came to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah, and left his servant there. But then in verse 4 it says, but he himself went on a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a broom tree. He asked that he might die, saying, it is enough now, Lord. And he wanted the Lord to take his life away from him, for he thought he was no better than his fathers. And then he lay down and slept under a broom tree, and behold, an angel touched him and said to him, arise and eat. And he looked, and behold, there at his head was a cake baked on hot stones and a jar of water. And he ate and drank and lay down again. And the angel of the Lord came a second time and touched him and said, arise and eat, for the journey is too great for you. And he arose and ate and drank and went in the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the mount of God. And so I wanted to share this passage with you because Elijah encountered a great victory, right? So he was miraculously provided for by God with the ravens, and then God directed him to the widow. And, he really helped the widow out in terms of so the Lord actually said in 1 Kings 17 that he commanded a widow to provide him food and drink. And so this is the story where she had the oil and the flour. She baked Elijah a cake with her last. And the oil in the jar, flour never was empty. So they had food miraculously provided by God. So Elijah went from this high, being provided by God in the midst of a drought. There's a word there, because the Lord can provide for you in your drought season, right? We just have to have faith. And then the other thing is he went on another high, right? Where he defeated the prophets of Baal. I think there were about 450 of them. Yeah, 450 prophets of Baal. And they were just being ridiculous. They had a prophetic showdown about who was going to bring fire on the altar. The prophets of Baal fell miserably. Elijah put water on the altar and then called on the God of fire, right, to bring fire to the altar. And then the people realized, and now they acknowledge that the Lord is God. So Elijah defeated the prophets. He was provided for miraculously. And then at his high moment, right, where he was at the top of his game, Jezebel tried to kill him, and he went into flee into hiding. And literally he forgot who he was. He forgot whose he was in that moment. He forgot who he was, the prophet Elijah, who was backed by God, and his identity was in God. And he forgot whose he was, the only God who can answer by fire and make the fire from God coming from heaven and lighting a altar on fire that had been doused by water. A major victory, right? But he forgot all of those things because he was afraid because of what was going on around him. He was faced with imminent death from Jezebel. And so I share this to say that we can become afraid because of the things that are around us. And those things that are around us can cause us to forget who we are, and it can cause us to forget whose we are. And so this is why I talked about before about how I felt alone in a room full of people. I was surrounded by people who loved me, but yet I felt alone. You can feel alone because you feel like you're the only one who went through that situation, right? When Elisha was hiding from Jezebel, he felt alone. He thought that he wanted to die. As a matter of fact, he said that he was the only prophet left. And if you read on to verse 9 of 1 Kings 19, he says that There he came to a cave and lounged in it, and behold, the word of the Lord came to him. He said to him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He said, "I have been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant." That's why they ended up having a drought and everything before the rain came. He said, "They've thrown down your altars, killed your prophets with the sword, and I, even I, am the only one left, and they seek my life to take it away." So Elijah felt alone. He literally felt alone. And so he felt that he had no support. He's here, 40 days have passed. He's hidden in a cave, hiding from Jezebel. He feels alone, and he just feels like life is over for him. And so you might feel alone in your single motherhood journey. You might feel like life as you know it is over. I mean, life as you know it is kind of different, because now you have your child, but life isn't over. For me, I thought single motherhood meant the end of all of my dreams, all of my hopes. I thought it meant the end of my future, but it wasn't. It was actually the beginning. And as we come and see here, the Lord said, "Go out and stand on this mount before the Lord." And behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind tore the mountains and broke it into pieces and rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a low whisper. And when Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his cloak and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. And behold, there came a voice from him and said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He said, "I've been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts." And then he went in and said again that he really thought he was alone. And then the Lord tells him, and Elijah was also focused on his problems. He was focused on the problems that he was facing with Jezebel. And so sometimes we can feel alone because we can't see past our problems. We can't see past the obstacles that are going on in front of us. We can't see past the opposition. But we have to remember that the Lord is there. The Lord is speaking. The Lord is with us. And so sometimes single moms can feel alone because there really is no support, right? But get this, right? Elijah was literally by himself. And some of you who are single moms, you're literally on your own. You don't have family. You don't have friends. You don't have anybody who can trust. And you're wondering, like, when is that going to change? But guess what? I'm going to keep reading because I'm going to tell you right now that will change. God will send you your help. God will send you your tribe. He will send you who is supposed to come along with you to support you in your single motherhood journey. But it's super important that as you pray and ask God to send you support, for you to have the spiritual eyes, to have discernment, to know who is from God and who is not from God. So also ask God to reveal who it is that he has sent to you, so you are not deceived by a wolf in sheep's clothing who looks like that person is sent from God. And so get this, right? And so the Lord in verse 15 says, "Go and return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus. And when you arrive, you shall anoint Hazael to be king of Syria, and Jehu the son of Nimshi you shall anoint to be king of Israel. And Elisha," get this, "Elisha the son of Shaphat of Abel Menholah you shall anoint to be prophet in your place." Right? Did you catch this? Elijah thought that he was the only prophet. He thought that he was the only one left of God, who honored God, who feared God, who followed God's commandments. But guess what? And he thought that he was going to have to tackle this in and of himself. But guess what? God sends him help. God says that he told Elijah to anoint Elisha to be prophet in his place. So now Elisha is going to be, Elijah's assistant, being trained as an apprentice, and who will take over after Elijah as a prophet after he dies. But guess what? I'm going to jump down to verse 18, and this is even better. He says, "Yet I will leave 7,000 in Israel, all the knees that have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him." And so Elijah thought he was alone. But not only was God sending him help, God let him know he really wasn't alone. There were 7,000 people who still honored and loved the Lord. So Elijah was at this valley moment. He wanted to die. He thought things were over for him. He thought his ministry was over for him. He thought his life was over. And God said, let him know that he wasn't truly alone. And there are certain things that I wanted to highlight in this. Number one, we have to be on guard at our mountaintop to make sure that we're staying grounded in the Lord, because the mountain can become a valley. And in that valley, we can't forget God. We can't forget who we are. We can't forget whose we are. We have to be able to remember that the same God who was at the mountaintop, the same God that gave Elijah victory at the mountaintop, was the same God who was with him in the valley. And the second thing is that Elijah, who already knew God, who already had a relationship with God, literally saw God face to face almost. You know what? I mean, he covered his face, right? Because he knew that he could not see him and still live. And so he wrapped his face in a cloak and stood at the entrance of the cave. But he encountered physical God, like the physical manifestation of God. He encountered him at his low point. So we have to realize that God is still there. Even when we feel alone, God met him in his loneliness. God comforted him in his loneliness. God assured him victory in his loneliness. And God sent him help in his loneliness. And so his help, Elijah's help, came after the loneliness. See, when Elijah was lonely before, it was just him and the ravens coming to visit him, right, to feed him food. But then God brought him support with the widow. And then after that, he was alone in the cave. He thought he was the only one left. And God said, "Nuh-uh. I got a helper for you and 7,000 people who have not bent the knee to Baal." So he wasn't truly alone. But the thing that Elijah did that caused a lot of his heartache was that he forgot how God was with him before the rains came. He forgot how God was with him during the drought. He forgot how God was with him all of the other days of his life. And when he encountered a hard time that felt immovable, he forgot God and he forgot his authority in God. So it's really important that when we feel alone, we have to understand that we're never truly alone because God is with us. But when it feels like we don't have a support system around us, or we feels like, we feel alone because no one understands what we're going through, I want you to remember what this woman of God told me at church. You're not the first one who's been through an unplanned pregnancy. You're not the first one to become a single mom, and you won't be the last. And so take heart in the fact that you're not the only one in his situation, and know that God is sending your help. If he hasn't sent it already, God is sending your help. So don't give up on hope. God is with you at the mountaintop and in the valley. And don't forget about God. And remind yourself of who he is and what he has done in the past. And one of the other scriptures I want to leave you with is Hebrews 4, verses 15 and 16. And this is, it says, "Since then we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God. Let us hold fast to our confession, for we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin. Let us then with confidence draw near to the throne of grace, that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in our time of need." And so this is beautiful to be able to close on, because we have a great and high priest in Jesus Christ who has been through everything that we've been through. He has been tempted as we have been tempted. He has felt loneliness that we have felt loneliness, the same way that we have felt loneliness. He has felt betrayal like we have felt betrayal. He's felt isolation that we have faced isolation. He's been misunderstood, like we can at times feel misunderstood as single moms. But guess what? Jesus is there. He sympathizes with our weaknesses. He sympathizes with our pain, and therefore we can have confidence to draw near to the throne of grace. That throne of grace that gives us hope. That throne of grace that gives us renewal. That throne of grace that gives us peace. That throne of grace that gives us strength. That throne of grace that gives us mercy. That throne of grace that provides every one of our needs for us. That throne of grace that gives us hope. We can draw near, according to Hebrews 4:16, with confidence to that throne of grace, that we might receive mercy and find grace for our help in need. Help in a time of need. So I would say this to you, and I want to leave you with this. If you feel alone in your single motherhood journey, seek the Lord. And I know that it can sound cliche to be like, oh, seek the Lord, right? But truly, we have a great high priest who understands what we're going through, who sympathizes with us, who intercedes on our behalf. And when we seek him and let him know our desires, he is faithful to provide them. If you need help, he is faithful to provide it. If you need emotional support, he's faithful to provide it. If you need tangible support, and he is faithful to provide it. If you need direction and guidance, he is faithful to provide it. And so seek the Lord, and also seek him to have the wisdom and the discernment to know what is from him and what is not from him. So that way you are not deceived. And trust that when you receive your God-given help, that it is for your good. It is for your kids' good. And so I hope that this gives you hope. I hope that this gives you hope of a better future, because I know it did for me, because God did send me my tribe. God did send me my joy back. God did send me my peace, right? He brought it back. I didn't think that I would ever have joy again. I didn't think that I would ever have hope again. But he brought it back to me. He renewed me. He literally restored the years that the locusts have eaten, according to Joel 2, I think it's 24. And so have confidence, have faith, know that you're not alone, and know that God is sending you your tribe. And so I definitely want to encourage you to pick up the book, Navigating the Impossible, a survival guide for single moms from pregnancy through the first year of motherhood. It is available on Amazon. And in that book, I actually talk about how to build your support system as a new single mom. So definitely check out that. I have multiple chapters in terms of building your support system. Before you give birth, while like you're in the birthing process, and after you give birth. So 3 amazing informational packed chapters to be able to help you to build that support system, so that way you are not alone, really. And also the book talks about mental and emotional support as well. So there's just so many aspects to that book, Navigating the Impossible, survival guide for single moms from pregnancy through the first year of motherhood, which will help you along your single motherhood journey. They'll build that support system so you don't have to do it alone. And so make sure you like this video, love it, leave me some comments, let me know how this helped you. Make sure you subscribe and share it with your friend. Alrighty, have a good one. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.